Welcome back to the KMS Rundown. This is the second KMS Rundown. Is it wrap up? I keep saying rundown. God damn it. It's going to take me a fucking while to get used to that. But it is the second KMS wrap up of today after the emergency one when the podcast did not post until around like 4 p.m. I am joined today by 6'10", a new face on the network, and a face that some of you may know. It is Visionless Dave, who quickly is no longer on the rundown. Is this true?
I've been fired from the show I produce. Ziggy's ego's out of control, but I don't know. I'm a free agent, but let's focus on the main show. That's why I'm here.
I think you'll get swept up pretty quickly. But let's get into it. I mean, like obviously this is being posted a little bit later than normal. We're live at 8:00 instead of at 5 like I normally plan on doing. But it's I mean the show got up at 4. I don't know. Were you guys waiting for the show? What did you guys expect?
I was waiting all day. I was expecting a lot more conspiracy theories on Twitter. I was expecting a lot more people going crazy with that, but I was waiting all day. I believe the explanation though, but I thought I'd see a lot more on Twitter about like shady stuff. If that happened with Steve, I think we'd be hearing a lot more shady conspiracy theories.
I think so too.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Well, I do agree if it happened with Steve, there'd be more conspiracy because Steve's so talented that he's never going to mess up, a recording. So he's always going to get the show up on time. So if that were to happen with Steve, even as a Rob fan, I would say something's up here because Steve's just not capable of making mistakes like that.
You think it would be more kind of like a hostage situation? Like if the show doesn't get up on time with Steve, it's maybe Steve like, hey, something's wrong, but it's not up to me.
Yeah, I think just having the two Minifans in there, it just would have added to like the conspiracies. Like, what would they have said that made Steve take it down for hours? Like, what are they cutting for hours? But with Carano, it's just like he's kind of an idiot. So it's like, all right.
It sounded like I listened to the show today when it posted, and it sounded like they didn't get it. Carano didn't get a chance to post it because they had to do stuff for the secret project. Right. which is interesting, and it sounds like they had an interview or they had to go do something in Bridgewater. So that was interesting to say the least.
Yeah, it's probably tough timing for Steve to have COVID with so much stuff going on. But I did see him publicly kind of fall on the sword, even though it wasn't really his fault at all. So that's just a kind of guy Big Steve is. I did notice Carano forgot to beep out the name of Mike's blind school, so luckily they don't answer the phone, so it might be tough for Minifans to have fun with that. But
I've also heard security there is top notch too, so good luck getting it.
I also assume there's not that many blind schools. Like he was talking top of the notch, like people are traveling. I assume if you Google it, it's not that hard to find. But yeah,
true.
Yeah, I actually know a couple of my friends, they're a homosexual couple, and they've tried to get in a couple times, but they've been stopped at the door. And they're trying to look for their son for a good school for their son to learn how to be blind instead of waiting till he's 30 or so like that.
Right.
But let's get into it. Let's get into the topics of the day. I mean, the show kind of started off with Kirk asking Carano, what's going to happen tonight? You gonna back down? You gonna attack Carabas? And Carano said, I'm not backing down. He said he's going to go full at him. I did notice that today was probably, I want to say Matt was probably the least Matt Carano than I've seen him ever on a Kirk Minahan show. He seemed out of it. He seemed quiet. I don't know if that's because he was kind of, letting Steve and Tim do their thing, or if they were or like he said he's been having trouble sleeping, which I hope he gets help that he needs. If it's any goodwill, I sleep enough for probably the both of us. So
give him a couple hours.
Yeah. Well, it's tough, right? He's an unemployed guy and suddenly he has to do something for like 2 to 3 hours a day. That can be a big adjustment for somebody, No,
I think he's been stressing about like trying to get, not working necessarily with Kirk, but to be on a big time podcast like that, I'm sure it's very stressful, especially when you're not used to it on a full time basis. I mean,
one would think, but when when asked about that, he says he's not nervous at all and fully confident. Maybe to a fault. Maybe a little nerved or good would be good for him.
I'm sure he does have a few nerves, but the thing is, he just seems so bothered from the minute he walked in. I honestly think it's because if you remember a couple weeks ago, Kirk made jokes about Justin taking his spot as being like the next man in line and the next producer and everything. I think he came in bothered, and little stuff made him more and more bothered. Like the Carabas stuff made him more bothered. Then the Quantum Week Chris stuff made him even more bothered. The Steve's a liar guy made him more bothered. So he was getting bothered. Like he wasn't able to take a joke this week at all, I think.
I think today it was very not. I'd say this week it was tough. It was tough. He wasn't a big jokester guy. I wasn't really taking the joke. Everything was very serious. Everything was very kind of like I'm the best, which is fine. I mean, I wish I had that confidence. But
you're the best. Don't say you're the best.
You just gotta back it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they discussed a little bit on the show. Whether Carano is thin-skinned, which I think everybody in the world would say yes, except him. And then there was also a little bit of talk about is he delusional in regards to Kirk's how much Kirk has impacted the success of Quantum Week? Because part of me respects that, where he's like in his own little world, and I saw the thing on the iTunes charts that's really cool, but people have fallen into that trap where they've gotten a little too big for their britches, and if you're going to ride off the coattails of Kirk, to me it seems like you have to be very obedient, and you have to pay homage, and it seems like he might be kind of in a gray area there.
That was mind-boggling. That was crazy. That was unbelievable. If you look at a chart of like Quantum Week's like views and his interaction with Kirk, it would be like you'd see it every single time. It would go up every time he interacts with Kirk. It's insane to not think that was something. And he was honestly offended by Kirk saying like that's. He was like, no, it's 29 days. Yeah, it's 29 days, but it's affected in the last couple of days. So that went up in the last 29 days. Like, come on, man.
And I mean, I hear a lot of people. I hear a lot of people say on Twitter that people forget that Quantum Week, I believe, was launched the week after he first was the guest producer on the show. So by nature of that, there's an endless correlation to the success of Quantum Week and the thumbs up of Kirk Minahan.
Kirk asked him. Sorry, Kirk asked him last week when Mike was talking about his Patreons, and he was talking about his Patreons, and Kirk said, "How many of those are fans of mine?" He was like, "Well, most of them. Yeah, all of them are." But
yeah.
I will say, I mean, there are a couple of people who watch this show who aren't a fan of Kirk Minahan. I think it's my grandfather, and he has no idea what's going on. He thinks I'm on the radio. And I also think my aunt puts it on she works at an elderly home in Washington, D.C. So I think she might just put it on just, to pass the time, and they have no clue what's going on. So I'm not trying to say this show, like Kirk is the reason why the KMS wrap-up show gets a couple hundred views, but I guess he probably has a lot to do with it. I just think it's crazy to like you said about the first thing about being thin-skinned. I think Carano's thin-skinned. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that was something you have to take into account if he was going to get a further full-time future role with the show, because I do think he I know he said yesterday that there's these certain Minifans who live inside this bubble and all they do is hate. Well, Carano kind of lives in the opposite end of that bubble, where he just lives in Twitterverse, where he really hears nothing but praise, and so I think as long as you acknowledge these things, like if you're thin-skinned, say you're thin-skinned. I mean, it's fine. I think Steve would say that when he first started, Steve Robinson, when he first started on the show, he was thin-skinned. He wasn't prepared for to be the Kirk Minahan producer. I think you see that when he deleted the thing about Kirk talking about his parents and stuff like that. I'm just not sure. I just would find it interesting to know how Carano would handle a show like that.
The thing is, a thin-skinned sidekick isn't the worst thing. Like Kirk can play off somebody that's thin-skinned, but you can't shut off when you're thin-skinned, because what he did all week right now is when he didn't like something, he just shut off. Like you didn't hear him for minutes at a time in this podcast, and it wasn't because he was letting everybody else breathe. It was because he was shook about whatever they were talking about. Like, so you can be thin-skinned, but just don't shut off. Like,
yeah, I think there's a confusion a lot of times between being thin-skinned and like someone fighting back. So there's people on Twitter that I'll see like, oh, Kirk is sensitive, why is he fighting with Minifans? And there's a difference to me between being thin-skinned and like mass blocking people, and then if someone takes a shot at you, fighting back. Like if if you walked into someone's restaurant and you're just like, oh, this fucking restaurant sucks, your food sucks, I used to like it better, like they have a right to be like, well, fuck you, get out of here, you know? So it's a difference between being sensitive and just like fighting. I like when people fight back, no matter what side I'm on.
And like I said, there's nothing wrong. I think there's nothing wrong with being thin-skinned. I like Carano. I like Quantum Week Chris. I know there was a post earlier today that Quantum Week Chris, when I did the emergency press conference, he said he's going to, next time I end up in the hospital, he's going to save the $20 in gas and tolls. And like I've said a million times, I thank them for coming out. They did not have to do that. I never expected them to do that. But I'm not going to change my opinion or change the show based upon whether or not I like someone or whether or not they've done things for me in the past. I like both of them. I just think Carano just needs to come out and just say it. He just, listen, he's not a fighter.
Right.
And I think there are some fighters. I think Steve will fight back. I think even to a certain extent, Mike like to fight back. I just not sure. There is a place in this world for pop culture and things of that nature. I'm just not entirely sure that when it gets down to like wartime, that Carano would be the guy to go to.
When you go to a job interview though, and you're just so afraid to say anything wrong at first day, same thing. You're trying to paint yourself as the perfect person.
Yes,
that's what he's trying to do with Kirk.
Very much know.
He's like so afraid. He just seems afraid to step on eggshells with Kirk, and like that's the opposite of what you should do. You should want to stomp on them.
No. I don't necessarily think that. I think he's not on eggshells around Kirk. I think he's very confident around Kirk. I think he'll tell Kirk, shut when it comes to his song, when it had the Florence VFW song. He brought it up earlier in the week. He said, listen, that was a great song. You canned this beforehand. Like, I don't think that's walking around eggshells.
I think he's confident, but he's never gonna take a hard stance.
That's what I mean.
Kirk, unless it's on something playful like Caravas. But I also understand that it's not his place to come in as a guest producer and just be like, "Oh, you're wrong about that." But
that's true.
One thing that also kind of got discussed was, and I want to be, I don't know how to phrase it necessarily, but Kirk. There is a sense of Kirk has taken it pretty easy on him, whereas if Carano had been in my blind spot, I'd say Blind Mike has taken, 10,000 times more abuse from Kirk than Carano. Not even just because of time, but just at how hard Kirk would go after everything Mike would say when he was in one of those moods. And Kirk has been, like, obviously the guy's filling in, so he's not going to just dress him down. But even Carano seemed to be surprised to hear that. He's like, what do you mean? I've done a bunch of shows with you. You can go at me, but I think we all know that Kirk has never really
I agree with that.
Antagonized him very much.
I agree. Kirk has not gone
like Justin, you've seen that side of Kirk. You've been.
It's not fun. It's not great.
It's not fun. It's not fun.
I'm telling you though, I think that's a lot because he says so many neutral things, and even when he takes a stance, like we were talking about, and I love Carano, I really do. But when he says like stance, he'll like back it up with like something that supports Kirk. So when Kirk hears that, he's like not going at him immediately. Like Steve's the liar guy. He always talks about Steve's the liar guy. We know Dan, right? He thinks he's better than Steve's the liar guy, but he always says like, "But I love Steve's the liar guy. But I love him. I love him. He's great." But he always.
Do we think he sabotage that song today, or do we think that was a natural?
I think that was probably just an accident. I mean, I'm sure he accidentally he was playing it on like a Gmail file and he accidentally clicked out of it or something like that. It didn't sound like he was purposely trying to fuck up Steve. I think he likes Steve the Liar Guy. I personally love Steve the Liar Guy. I think he's the best parody songwriter. I think it's him, Warden of the North 2, and then Matt Carano 3.
Wow.
Warden number one all day.
I think
I got Warden at 1.
But no, I don't think Carano would purposely sabotage.
No, I think so.
I think, and if he would, holy shit, the balls on Carano. He would purposely sabotage the Kirk Minahan show in order to try to bring down a fellow parody songwriter, which I think is just completely unrealistic. Like I said before, Carano's not a fighter. I don't think would ever try to sabotage in that way. I think if anything, he's just a blocker, which is perfectly fine. Just block him. Don't have to deal with trolls, nonsense, anything else like that. But no, I don't think that was.
Is that a perfectly okay thing though in this type of universe to just block people? Because I feel like you should be so connected with everybody. I feel like that's the opposite what you should do.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a personal thing. Like Kirk's not big a blocker. Mike's not that big. I know Mike went on. They were calling him Mutant Mike for a while, but I mean, it's a personal thing. Like
I do think it's a personal thing. Like you can block people if you want, but if you do block people, you can't then turn around and criticize Courtney Fallon for doing the same thing. Essentially,
I agree.
My thing is it's a personal thing until you become like the producer of the show, though, and like then it's like kind of becomes more than personal. So I feel like you shouldn't block people. I don't really care. He hasn't blocked me. I'm just saying we actually DM and he's very nice. But I feel like once you become part of the show, you shouldn't be blocking those people because like that's kind of part of the show.
Yeah, but I also feel like it's up to you because I mean, if you assume like say what you want about people messaging things or people saying things, if you don't want to see people saying, "Oh, you should get fired," you should blah blah blah.
That's true.
Just block them, just mute them or something. I have no problem with that. But like I said with VD, you just got to acknowledge that that's what you're like.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap it back around to today's show, which I think, even though I wouldn't call it necessarily a phone call, like a phone call in the sense of people like calling in like Donald Trump, I pissed my pants at the Steve's mechanic call today. It was incredible. I don't know who was behind that. I have a feeling it might be Kevin from Bristol, but it was the funniest thing I have ever heard in my entire life. The entire thing. After this, I'm putting the entire call up on the KMS Clips account, so you'll be able to see the reaction and stuff like that. But what was your guys' opinion? Was that a top 5 call? Was that what you expected?
I think it was good. Part of me, maybe I'm wrong and it went over my head, but it seemed like kind of a EEI callback in some sense. So I think a little bit maybe went over my head, but it did. I think the people who were old EEI people probably really enjoyed it. But yeah, it was good.
I think if you
I wouldn't
know
have
Steve
it in my top
Providence,
5. Yeah, I wouldn't have it in my top 5.
If you know Steve from Providence, you know his story where
yeah.
And all this other stuff, it makes it on a different level of comedy, and I thought it was great.
I thought that was unreal. I thought it was funny as hell. I figured I was assuming you guys might know who was behind that call. I really didn't. But I mean, just imagining like my reaction if I was sitting in Steve Providence like seat there. I mean, that's just got to be like that's funny as hell. There's no getting around there. I mean, I can't even imagine sitting in that seat right there. That's tough, but it's funny.
I will say, Steve from Providence played along. I mean, he
did.
He gave the phone number. He's trying to reconnect with his long lost mother. Of whom
that can't be easy. That can't be easy.
20 years. I mean, Jesus, you want to talk about bringing up anything? He's trying to reconnect with his mom, of whom he hates, and he says he hasn't spoken to in 25 years. I say good for him. I think Tim and Steve both had good performances today. I think it was. I mean, don't get me wrong. It wasn't like Quantum Week Chris performance. Like I said, if you want to see my opinion of Quantum Week Chris, like watch the Tuesday show because that was spectacular. But I think Tim and Steve they play well off of each other. They're both old school guys. They're both committed to the show. They brought in cookies. They have all these different projects going on.
So they're trying to sneak into Mike's school. He thought his mom worked there for the last 12 years.
Yeah, she hasn't worked there. She hasn't worked there since the Bush administration.
2008. Yeah. That's absurd.
That's funny. The fact that the woman knew it and when she was like, she hasn't worked here in 12 years.
What has she been doing? She said she left and came back. I'm like, what the fuck are the odds of that?
Oh, that's so funny. But
yeah, those are two like old school Barstool guys. I've been reading Barstool since like 2011, like 2010. Those are two like old school Barstool feeling guys where they're just like shooting the shit. And that was so funny to me. I think everybody was genuinely like smiling listening to that episode.
It sounded very like just some friends. Yeah, like you said, just shooting the shit kind of thing. Like some old school, like high school buddies or, college friends who get together who haven't seen each other in a couple months or a couple of years. And they all just go back to shitting on each other and claiming that, Steve's a failure and all this other fun stuff. But it's no, that phone call was incredible. And the anything else you guys want to say about the phone call or about the Steve's mom thing? I just thought it was interesting.
Very brave of Steve to open that door, especially on the airwaves. Very brave. I'm sure there will be people hunting his poor mother down, but yeah, I thought they were both great, Tim and Steve.
And like, I necessarily don't even have a problem with when Steve Robinson's like, I don't want to get my parents involved in all this and all this other thing. I mean, you just got to understand that like when you're in the show, it's going to happen. But Stephen Providence was like, "Fuck it, here's her number. You know, we'll call her up. We'll try to find her. We'll see what she's been up to." Well, you know, he was getting real personal, even like with the stories about like him like seeing his mom at Stop and Shop and all this other stuff. It was very deep.
I just think though he's seen where Kirk's best moments have been, and that they derive from places like that. They like come from very real places. So he wanted to be able to like join in on that and not like give Kirk like he didn't want to give Kirk a roadblock. You know what I mean?
Oh, I completely see what you're saying, because I mean, Steve from Providence knows when Kirk's at his best, so he's going to give Kirk those materials so he can, you know, build a house and do all that stuff. But the last thing I wanted to mention before we wrap up wasn't too much going on in today's show. I'm very excited for tomorrow's show, but there was mention of Madawaska at the end of the episode today, where they were talking about Steve walking, and they said like, "Oh, are you going to walk in Madawaska?" And it just got me thinking, did you know Madawaska, if it takes place the same day it did last year, is only 2 months and 1 week away?
Mind blown.
I don't know how that's going to happen.
It's sooner than you'd think. I'm sure Steve Robinson and Kirk are already all working on that. They mentioned how it's going to not be as big this year. I think they said they're going to be at like half capacity. I'm sure it's still very, you know, with all the COVID restrictions, they got to deal through all that bullshit. But Madawaska is right around the corner.
I mean, could we have a vaccine though? Maybe.
What'd you say?
Could we have a vaccine by then? Possibly, maybe.
I have no idea. I mean, we could. I hear the vaccine's coming tomorrow. The vaccine's not coming until 2032. It's I have no idea what's going on.
That is a good point that it's sneaking up. I live in California, so there's no seasons, so it just it feels like summer forever. So that is kind of tripping me out. Yeah.
But I will say it's just something where it is sneaking up. It seems like Madawaska 2020 was yesterday, you know, and it's already sneaking up on us again. So I just wanted to bring that up, you know, just to kind of like get people thinking like, oh, Madawaska's coming. I know Kirk said it's not going to be any sort of raffle. It's going to be just a race for the tickets like it was last year. They're going to drop at a certain time. Everyone goes to them. I'm sure it's going to sell out again. And I just thought that was just an interesting thing, just that they quickly shot in there, but I just haven't heard too much Madawaska talk recently.
What do you think about the numbers? What do you anticipate? How many do you think will go?
I mean, Kirk said half, so that would be 75.
5, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Neither of you guys were there last year, but it was kind of like a banquet hall sort of thing, and there were tables. I'm not entirely sure if they would still have like tables, but they would just be more spaced out, or they would. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure how that whole thing would work. But anything else you guys want to talk about from the show today before we wrap things up? I think we covered pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Well, why did Adam and Jersey get banned? I mean, I'm very happy about it, but why
did you not hear? Did you not hear?
I heard.
Yes,
Okay. It's as easy as that.
I listen to the big guy. I mean, there's one person who matters in this world, and if he says, I don't like Adam and Jersey's voice, whenever he started talking, I was like, I don't want to fucking hear this. It's like, okay, well, bye. So so Adam and Jersey no longer available to be on the KMS wrap-up show. I mean that's pretty much it. Oh, the other thing is I just find it hilarious that Steve from Providence and Tim McCann have no idea what a press pass is or how they work.
Concept of that. They think that's just like
I need your press pass.
They think that's like a ghost key that you can put it in anywhere and you can just walk in.
They think it's like an ID. That. But it's not. It's like it's someplace you have to apply to. Like if you wanted a press pass for Fenway, you go to Fenway and you're like, hey, I'm a member of the press.
Yeah.
Can I get a press pass? And they go, oh, here you go. It's not like you just you're like a member of the press.
Yeah.
You have it.
It's not like a blanket license that covers all events, which I think it reminded me of like an Always Sunny or like a skit from The Office where they're just like, we'll just get a press pass. And he kept harping on it. He kept bringing it back.
Bankruptcy. I'll just
could really use that press pass.
And the one thing I meant to ask you guys, it got brought up, is they talked about whether Carano watches the show or not. I think he does. Do you think he listens every day?
I'm sure he listens every day, but
I think so.
you got to say, like, a couple of the questions he was asking these past couple of days did not sound like they were coming from someone who,
like a Tim and Canton type.
Yes,
mind,
and like I'm sure that's just part of like Matt Kronishik. I'm sure he listens every day.
Right.
But I mean, to have the take where Carabas is terrible on.
I think that all goes back to when Kirk first talked about Jared. He would be like, "Oh, he's a talentless hack," but he was kidding around kind of because he knows Jared. He knows where Jared's come from. Mm-hmm. So like when he said like Jared stinks or whatever, I think Carabas just heard that, or I think Carano heard that, and he just thought like automatically he sucks, and he's just stuck to that because like if you know Kirk though, like you know Jared's a good guest, like he just is.
Yeah. And even I have a Tim and Canton kind of said today on the show that Carabas is like very professional, kind of insinuating that he's buttoned up. And I don't know if you ever listened to Barstool Radio back in the day, but to me, like I've heard Carabas say how he's 7 of his ex-girlfriends are now
all
gay.
Lesbians.
And they're all lesbians, and like he's very transparent with that stuff and kind of being open about being just a really weird guy. So
I will say, I said. I lied on the previous wrap up earlier today. I did say at one point, I believe I said like Carabas is very hidden from the outside world, and that's not true. He pretty much talks about everything.
He was until he got on the Barstool Radio, like the CCK stuff, and then he opened up. It was always just Jared baseball, and then he got on the Barstool Radio, and he really opened up. Every Friday they would have him on talking about weird shit, so he really did open up. Yeah.
And also Carano, I don't know if he realizes that Carabas has gone, toe to toe with Portnoy in the old days. Probably more. There's probably only a few Barstool employees who have been staring down the Portnoy barrel before, and they've gone like 12 rounds, probably a dozen times. So he knows how to fight and argue. So this should be interesting.
So I kind of thought that was that kind of based in the argument of Carano's always been anti-Barstool, like big time anti-Barstool. He wants them to go subscription service. Mm-hmm. So I think him being anti-Carabas is a little bit just because he's the anti-Barstool guy.
I see. That makes sense.
That makes sense.
I think there's no doubt if you just listen to these past couple weeks that the relationship between Kirk and Barstool is at an all-time high.
High.
I don't see. I don't know anything about contracts or something like that, but I mean, Kirk said he's very open to a contract extension. I don't know if you guys know this, but Quantum Week Chris actually coaxed that out of him on the Tuesday show. Kirk
just never, amazing questions.
But it's but no, I think subscription is not the way to go. I mean, hey, it's Mike's on his way there, but I just don't think it fits in with the Kirk and the Barstool plan right now. But thank you guys for joining me. I do want to give a shout out. There is at 9:00 tonight. There's going to be a eating contest.
McChicken eating contest between Jay and Tim. 30 minutes. Who can eat the most McChickens in 30 minutes? There will be some commentary from me and Fez. John from Scranton's doing some kind of sideline reporting. There may or may not be a Minifan singing the national anthem. So
who's the highest number? Make a prediction. What's the highest number in McChickens?
I got Tim just because I think Jay is too undisciplined to skip lunch and probably had put no forethought into it. And I just when I put the proposition out there, Tim responded right away, said anytime, any place, any food. And Jay, he's kind of been dancing around it a little bit. So I think Wriggled's by 1 trillion tonight.
So that's just like Tim's Thursday night. He was doing it anyway.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
He was ready to go.
Well, thank you guys for watching.
Thanks, guys.
Hopefully, I get this up on an RSS feed soon. It's in the process. I will talk to you guys tomorrow after what should be a spectacular Kirk Minahan show. Once again, thank you, everyone, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.